My name is Connor Woods. I am 63 years old, and the night my son-in-law poured a bowl of soup over my head in a restaurant full of people was the night I stopped being patient. But before I tell you what I did about it, I need you to understand something. The man who did it had no idea who he was sitting across from. Neither did my daughter. That was my fault. And for a long time, I told myself it was a virtue. Patrick Bailey walked into Riley's life 7 years ago wearing a jacket that cost more than my first truck. He was 38, worked in corporate finance, and had the particular confidence of a man who had never once been told no by anyone who mattered to him. He shook my hand at their first dinner like he was doing me a favor, looked me up and down once, the worn boots, the plain watch, the calluses, and made a decision about me in about 4 seconds. He was not entirely wrong about what he saw. He was completely wrong about what it meant. I grew up in Macon, Georgia, left at 19 with a pickup truck, $200, and a contract to haul building materials outside Atlanta. Spent the next 10 years driving routes nobody else wanted, saving everything, sleeping in the cab more nights than I slept in a bed. By the time I was 32, I owned 3 trucks. By the time I was 40, I owned a freight depot in Hapeville and 2 warehouses in College Park. By the time Patrick Bailey shook my hand and decided I was nobody, Connor Woods Logistics had 17 facilities across 5 states and a client list that included 4 of the largest retailers in the Southeast. Nobody in that restaurant knew that. Patrick certainly didn't. The dinner was Riley's idea. She called it a catch-up, said she missed me, said Patrick wanted to talk. I should have known from the way she said Patrick's name first that the evening wasn't really about catching up. The restaurant was in Buckhead, the kind of place where they bring the bread in a linen cloth, and the waiter introduces himself by first name and makes eye contact for slightly too long. Riley had chosen it. She always chose expensive places, and then somehow made me feel like I was the one out of place inside them. I drove straight from a site visit in Norcross, still in my work clothes. I parked my truck between 2 German sedans and walked in. Riley didn't stand up when she saw me. Patrick didn't stand up either. "Dad," she said it the way you say the name of something mildly inconvenient. "You could have changed." Patrick looked at my boots and then looked away, picked up his drink. I sat down, ordered water, looked at my daughter across the white tablecloth, and tried to find the girl who used to fall asleep in the passenger seat of my truck on long hauls when she was 8 years old, head against the window, completely trusting. She was in there somewhere. Patrick cleared his throat. "We need to talk about the Peachtree property," he said. "That was my rental building in Decatur, 4 units, fully paid off. Heidi and I had bought it the year Riley was born. I used to drive her past it when she was small and tell her, 'That one's yours someday.' 'We need you to sign it over,' Patrick said, 'before the end of the year, tax purposes.'" I looked at Riley. She looked at the table. "Dad," she said it quietly, "you're not getting any younger. The maintenance alone. I re-roofed it last spring, replaced both HVAC units. That's not really the point." "Then what is the point, Riley?" Patrick leaned forward. "The point is that property is sitting in your name doing nothing while we could be leveraging it. We've found you a nice place, assisted living, very comfortable, good community." "I'm 63. "Dad," Riley touched my hand. Her nails were perfect. "We're trying to help you." I almost believed her. That is the thing about your own child. You want to believe them more than you want to believe the evidence sitting right in front of your face. I told them I wasn't signing anything that night, that I needed to think. Patrick's expression didn't change. He just nodded slowly, the way a man nods when he has already decided the conversation is over and is simply waiting for the other person to catch up. The food came. We ate in silence. And then, between the main course and dessert, Patrick stood up, walked towards the service station, and came back carrying something. A bowl, lobster bisque, the restaurant's signature dish, still warm. I did not understand what was happening until it was already happening. He tipped it over my head. It hit my shoulders first, then my collar, then ran down the side of my face and onto the white tablecloth. The table next to us went completely silent. A woman across the room put her hand over her mouth. "That," Patrick said, loud and clear, "is what happens when you waste our time." I sat completely still. I looked at Riley. She looked back at me and said, "And I need you to understand," she said this calmly, quietly, like she was commenting on the weather. "He's right, Dad. Stop being difficult." I picked up my napkin, wiped my face, reached into my jacket pocket, found the name I was looking for. Pressed call. "Logan," I said, keeping my voice low and steady. "It's Connor. I need you at the office first thing tomorrow. Bring the Woods Holdings file. All of it." I ended the call, stood up, looked at both of them one last time. "Enjoy your dinner." I walked out of that restaurant into the Atlanta night with bisque drying on my collar and something I hadn't felt in years burning in my chest. Not humiliation. Clarity. They had no idea who they had just humiliated. They had no idea what was already in motion.
Logan Powell had known me for 28 years. He was sitting behind his desk at 7 in the morning when I walked in, the Woods Holdings file already open in front of him, rubber-banded twice, 4 inches thick. He looked at me the way a man looks at someone he's known long enough to skip the polite part. "You look like you didn't sleep." "I didn't," I said. "Close the door." I had driven home from Buckhead the night before, showered, put my work clothes in the trash, and sat at my kitchen table until 3 in the morning going through everything. Not angry, methodical. I pulled out a yellow legal pad and wrote down every single thing I had quietly put in place for Riley and Patrick over the past 11 years. Every thread, every guarantee, every introduction, every favor called in. When I added it all up, I sat back in my chair and looked at the number for a long time. It was more than I had realized. That happens sometimes when you did things quietly and didn't keep score. The total had a way of surprising you. Logan poured 2 coffees and sat down across from me. "Before we start," he said, "I need to ask you something and I need you to answer me straight." I nodded. "Is any part of this about what happened at the restaurant? Because if it's about the humiliation, about being angry, we should wait a week, sleep on it, come back when—" "Logan," I looked at him, "I've been watching this happen for 4 years. The distance, the entitlement, the way Patrick talks to me like a piece of furniture in a room he's already decided to redecorate. Last night didn't change anything. Last night just made me stop pretending I hadn't already seen it." He picked up his pen. "Okay," he said. "Let's start with the apartment. Here is what nobody knew about Riley and Patrick's life in Midtown Atlanta. The condo on Peachtree Circle, the one Patrick told everyone at his firm he had negotiated himself, the one Riley posted about constantly with the caption, "Our little piece of the city." The mortgage was co-signed under a shell company called Heidi Rose LLC. Heidi Rose was my late wife's name. I had set it up 9 years ago when Riley and Patrick couldn't qualify for the loan on their own. Patrick's salary looked impressive on paper, but his debt-to-income ratio was a disaster. I had stepped in quietly, guaranteed the note,
and let them believe they had done it themselves. I wanted Riley to feel settled. I wanted her to feel secure. I wanted her husband to feel like a success so she would be happy. That was the floor I had built under their lives, and they had been standing on it for 9 years without once looking down. If I dissolve Heidi Rose LLC, I said, what happens to the note? Logan looked up over his glasses. Bank calls it. They'd have 60 days to refinance under their own names. Would they qualify? Logan slid a single sheet across the desk, which was its own answer. I looked at the sheet. Dissolve it, I said. He wrote it down. Then he turned to the next page. Patrick worked at a corporate finance firm called Meridian Group on Peachtree Street. He had built what looked like an impressive client roster over the past 6 years: 3 anchor accounts, a regional healthcare network, a commercial real estate group, and a logistics infrastructure fund. All 3 had come through introductions I had made, old relationships, favors called in from men I had known for 30 years who trusted my word because I had never once given them a reason not to. I had made those calls quietly, never told Patrick, never told Riley. I had done it because I wanted Patrick to succeed, because I wanted my daughter to be proud of the man she had married. I sat with that for a moment, the amount of invisible work that had gone into making Patrick Bailey look like something he wasn't. Pull the introductions, I said. Connor, pull the introductions. He wrote it down. Then he turned to the next page. Riley worked 3 days a week at a contemporary art gallery in Virginia Highland called the Danielle George Gallery. Danielle George was an old friend of Heidi's who hired Riley 6 years ago as a personal favor to me when Riley was between jobs and too proud to say she needed help. I had never told Riley that either. I'll call Danielle myself. Logan set his pen down. He looked at me across the desk the way he'd looked at me in 30 years of hard conversations, not judging, just making sure I was sure. You understand, he said slowly, that when all of this moves, it moves fast, and some of it can't be undone. I looked out the window at the Atlanta skyline, a city I had spent 40 years moving freight through, quietly, in the background while men like Patrick Bailey stood in the foreground and took up space. I know, I said. Then let's finish the file. We worked for 4 hours. By 11 a.m., a series of very quiet, very legal, very permanent things had been set in motion. The Heidi Rose dilution was filed. Logan sent carefully worded letters to 2 of Meridian Group's anchor clients, not threatening, not accusatory, just a gentle reminder of the original relationship and a warm introduction to another firm. All of it looked like natural business moving. None of it could be traced back to an old man with lobster bisque on his collar. That afternoon, my phone rang. A number I didn't recognize, Atlanta area code. I picked up. Mr. Woods? The voice was flat and controlled. Not Logan, not anyone from my office. This is Patrick. I said nothing. How did you find out so fast? Silence on the line. That's what I thought, and I hung up. I sat in my office chair for a long time after that, not satisfied, not triumphant, just very still. Because there was one thing Logan and I had not touched, one thing that had nothing to do with money or business or shell companies. The voicemail. The last message Heidi left Riley from the hospital, 3 days before she died. Riley had never listened to it. I knew because Heidi had told me herself, in that quiet way she had of telling me the things that mattered most. If she doesn't listen, Connor, you'll know what to say when the time comes. I still had the transcript, and I was beginning to think that everything, the coldness, the distance,
The years of Riley looking through me instead of at me might have started the night she chose not to press play.
Isabel Foster had worked at Meridian Group for 14 years. She was not loud, she was not dramatic. She was the kind of woman who remembered everything, said little, and had spent over a decade watching Patrick Bailey take credit for other people's work while smiling at the right people in the right rooms. She called Logan on a Wednesday morning. Logan called me before I'd finished my first coffee. "It's happening," he said. Isabel had been in the building early. She described the scene word for word the way only someone who had been waiting a long time to describe it could. Patrick standing in the senior partner's office, voice rising, hands flat on the desk. The kind of performance a man puts on when he already knows he's losing and is hoping volume will change that. The senior partner, a composed man named Frederick Hale who had run Meridian Group for 22 years, sitting perfectly still across from him, the way powerful men sit when they have already made a decision and are simply waiting for the other person to finish being loud. 3 accounts, Isabel told Logan. The healthcare network, the real estate group, and the infrastructure fund. All 3 sent disengagement letters yesterday. Frederick told Patrick that his book of business no longer justified his compensation structure. Logan relayed all of this to me while I stood in my kitchen in Brookhaven. "How did Patrick take it?" I asked. Isabel said he used the word sabotage 4 times. Frederick told him that was a serious accusation and he should think very carefully before repeating it. I looked out the window at the backyard. Heidi had planted a garden back there the year Riley was born. Roses, mostly. I hadn't touched them since the funeral. Somehow they kept coming back every spring without me doing a single thing. "And Riley?" I asked. Logan paused. She called the gallery. Danielle told her the position was being eliminated, budget restructuring. She was kind about it. I had asked Danielle to be kind. Danielle had been kind. Riley called me that afternoon for the first time in 6 weeks. I let it ring. She called again. I picked up. "Dad." Her voice was different. The careful, managed patience she usually carried was completely gone. What was underneath it sounded younger, almost confused, like someone who had just discovered the ground they had been standing on was not solid. "Something is happening," she said. "Patrick lost 3 clients in 1 day. I lost my job. The bank sent a letter about the mortgage, something about a co-signer entity being dissolved. I don't—" She stopped. "That was Heidi Rose LLC, I said. Silence on the line. "That was your mother's name," I said. Another silence, longer. "Dad," her voice dropped. Did you? "Riley, I'm going to ask you something and I need you to actually answer me." She waited. "The voicemail, the one your mother left you from the hospital 3 days before she died, the one you never listened to." The silence that followed was the longest I'd sat through since the night Heidi passed. When Riley finally spoke, her voice had broken open in a way I had not heard since she was a small girl. "I couldn't," she whispered. "I couldn't press play because if I heard her voice, I would have to accept that she was actually— I would have to—" She stopped. 8 years, I said quietly. No anger in it, just the plain weight of the number. "I know. You stopped being able to look at me around the same time, Riley. Have you ever connected those 2 things?" She didn't answer, but she didn't hang up either. That evening, I drove to Midtown. I parked across the street from the building on Peachtree Circle and sat in my truck for a while. Lights on in the 3rd-floor unit, shadow of someone moving near the window. My phone buzzed. Logan. Patrick just called my office. He's connected the Heidi Rose LLC to you. He's angry. I mean, genuinely. Be careful." I texted back, "Noted." Then I got out of the truck. I didn't go up, not yet. I just stood on the sidewalk in the October Atlanta air, looking up at that window, thinking about the 22-year-old girl who used to call me from college just to tell me about her day, who used to sit on the kitchen counter when I cooked and talk until midnight, who had her mother's laugh and her mother's way of tilting her head when she was thinking hard about something. She was still in there, but I was not going to drag her out. She had to choose to come out herself. My phone buzzed again. Not Logan, a number I didn't recognize. I picked up. "Mr. Woods, flat, controlled. This is Patrick." I said nothing. "I know what you did, and I want you to know I am not going to let you destroy my career because of some overreaction to a dinner." I stood on that sidewalk with Heidi's voice in the back of my head, the things she had said to me in the hospital in the quiet of the last week when it was just the two of us and the room was dark. "Connor, don't let Riley turn Patrick into a project. She fixes things to avoid feeling them." I hadn't understood it then. I understood it now. "Patrick, this isn't about dinner." "Then what is it about?" "It's about 12 years of me holding a floor under your feet while you convinced my daughter I was irrelevant." He started to respond. I hung up. I walked back to my truck, started the heater. Then I did something I hadn't planned on doing for another week. I picked up my phone and called Riley back. "There's something I need to send you, a transcript. You don't have to read it tonight, but when you're ready." A long breath on the other end. The voicemail. "Yes." Quiet for a moment, then softly, "Okay, Dad. Okay." I drove home through the Atlanta night feeling something shifting, not loudly, not dramatically, the way ice shifts in early spring, quietly, inevitably, because the temperature had finally changed.
The letter arrived Saturday morning. Not an email, an actual letter on legal letterhead, hand-delivered to my front door at Brookhaven at 8 in the morning by a courier who didn't make eye contact. Patrick had retained outside counsel, tortious interference with business relationships, subpoenas of Woods Holdings financial records going back 15 years, and this exact phrase, emotionally motivated spite. I read it twice, folded it, set it next to my coffee. Then I called Logan. "He faxed a copy to my office last night," Logan said before I could speak. "He faxed it?" "The man is 41 years old, Connor. He faxed it." First time I'd almost laughed all week. "Can he do anything with it?" "Not a thing. Everything we did was legal. But here's the problem for Patrick. Discovery works both ways. He'd have to explain under oath that his entire book of business was built on introductions made by the father-in-law he poured soup on." I drank my coffee. "Let him file," I said. 2 hours later, Logan called back. Isabel had heard through a mutual contact that Patrick called Riley the night before, told her I was behind everything, that the dinner was just the excuse I'd been waiting for. "What did Riley say?" I asked. "She told him to get out." I set my cup down, packed a bag, drove to her friend Josh's place in Decatur. I didn't call Riley that day. I worked in the yard instead, trimmed Heidi's roses the way she'd shown me, cut them lower than you think, Connor. They're stronger than they look. Fixed the gate latch that had been sticking since August. Around 3, my phone lit up. Unknown number. "This is Riley. I'm at Josh's. I read the transcript." 10 minutes of nothing, then, "I need to see you." She arrived at 6.
Same porch she'd stood on 100 times growing up. She looked like she hadn't slept, still in yesterday's clothes. I opened the door before she knocked. We sat at the kitchen table. I made tea. Neither of us touched it. She had the transcript in her hand, edges soft from being folded and unfolded. "She knew," Riley said. "Mom knew I wasn't going to pick up. She knew you were scared." In the message, she said she wasn't angry, that watching me grow up was the greatest thing she ever did. Riley's voice caught. "And then she said to be good to you. She said your father is going to be very alone, and he's not going to say so, so you're going to have to decide to show up without being asked." The kitchen went quiet. "Why didn't you?" I asked. No anger, just the honest weight of it. "I married Patrick 6 months after the funeral," she said it slowly. "I made his life my whole project because it was easier than sitting in this kitchen missing her. I turned you into a bank because it was easier than turning you into someone I might lose too." I hadn't expected her to see it that clearly, that quickly. "The dinner. Patrick's idea." Not a question. She nodded. "He'd been building toward it for months, kept saying you needed to be put in your place, that you were too comfortable, too present." She looked down. "I let him because I'd decided you were indestructible. I forgot you were a person who could be hurt." I reached into the drawer and slid a card across the table. Logan's number. "He filed this morning. It won't go anywhere. But if Patrick contacts you with anything that feels like pressure, you call that number immediately." She picked it up carefully. "Dad," barely a whisper, "I'm sorry. For Tuesday. For all of it. For the years of it." I'd imagined this moment many times since Buckhead. In some versions I was cold. In some I said nothing. Instead, I reached across and covered her hand with mine. "I know," I said. The tea went cold. The October dark came down over Heidi's garden outside. And for the first time in years, this house didn't feel like a place where someone used to live. It felt like a place where someone still did.
Patrick Bailey filed his lawsuit on a Tuesday, same day of the week as the restaurant. I don't know if that was intentional. Men like Patrick don't think poetically. They just move toward whatever they believe will restore their position. Logan called me when the filing hit the system. "Discovery starts in 60 days, he said. His attorney is requesting Woods Holdings financial records going back 15 years. "Let them request," I said. "Connor." Logan's voice dropped the way it did when he wanted me to actually listen. "When they see the full picture of what you own, the holdings, the facilities, the contracts, Patrick's entire case collapses because it proves that everything he built was built on your infrastructure. You can't claim sabotage from a man whose support was the only reason your career existed." "I know. So, you understand this goes public." I looked out the kitchen window at Heidi's garden. A robin had landed on the fence post, first one I'd seen all season. "Logan," I said, "I spent 40 years moving freight across 5 states without needing a single person to know my name. I don't need to be invisible anymore." He was quiet for a moment. "All right," he said, "then let it go public." It went public on a Thursday. Not loudly, not dramatically, just the quiet, inevitable way the truth tends to surface when the paperwork finally catches up with the story. The discovery documents landed at Patrick's attorney's office at 9 in the morning. By noon, Isabel Foster had called Logan. By 1, Logan had called me. His attorney called a recess, Logan said. Apparently, Patrick spent the afternoon alone in a conference room reading through the Woods Holdings files. How long? 3 hours. I thought about that. Patrick Bailey sitting alone in a conference room for 3 hours reading through 40 years of work I had never once mentioned at a dinner table. 17 facilities across 5 states,
contracts with 4 of the largest retailers in the Southeast, the Heidi Rose LLC, the Peachtree property, the 3 client introductions, every invisible thread I had quietly run through his life for 11 years, documented, filed, and now sitting in a stack of discovery papers in front of him. How did he look when he came out? I asked. Logan paused. Isabel said he looked like a man who had just read his own file and didn't recognize himself in it. Patrick withdrew the lawsuit 3 weeks later. No statement, no apology, no phone call. He just quietly withdrew it and accepted a settlement that gave him considerably less than he had expected, because it turned out that when you remove the invisible scaffolding from a man's career, there isn't as much left to divide. Riley filed for divorce in November. She did it herself, sat across from Amelia Walsh, a family attorney Logan had recommended, and went through every document with a patience and focus I hadn't seen in her in years, the patience of someone who had decided to understand her own life for the first time. Grant contested it initially. Then the discovery from his own lawsuit landed on his desk, and he apparently spent a very long afternoon reading through the same Woods Holdings files his attorney had requested. And somewhere in that reading, he understood fully what he had been living inside for 11 years. He stopped contesting, withdrew everything, accepted the settlement quietly, and moved back to Columbus, Ohio, where his parents lived. Last I heard, he was working at a regional firm. Modest salary, building something from the ground floor for the first time in his adult life. I didn't feel triumphant about that. I felt nothing about it, which surprised me. I had expected satisfaction. What I got instead was something quieter, the feeling you get when a long noise finally stops and you realize how much energy you had been spending just tolerating it. The week after the settlement, I drove out to the Peachtree property in Decatur. 4 units, fully occupied. New gutters I'd had put in that spring. The small garden out front was starting to fill in the way Heidi had always said it would if I just left it alone long enough. I sat in my truck outside it for a while. Still in my name. I was in no hurry. Some things you hold on to until you are absolutely sure the person receiving them understands what they are being given. I thought we were getting there. That evening, Riley called. Not about Patrick, not about the settlement, not about any of it. "Dad," she said, "can I come for dinner Sunday?" I looked around the kitchen, the chair where Heidi used to sit, the counter where Riley used to perch and talk until midnight when she was 19 years old and the world was still something we figured out together. "I'll cook," I said. "Mom's pot roast? 3 hours, low heat, don't touch it." She laughed. Heidi's laugh, the way she tilted her head when something genuinely caught her off guard. "Sunday," she said. "Sunday," I said. The Heidi Woods Foundation opened in April, not named after me, named after her. That was the only part of this whole thing I had been certain about from the beginning. Before the lawsuit, before the dissolution, before the letter on the kitchen counter. I had been planning it quietly for 2 years, a foundation that would do exactly what I had spent 40 years doing, move things from where they were to where they needed to be, just people instead of freight. Education grants for first-generation college students across Atlanta's South Side, the same neighborhoods I had driven through at 19 in a truck that burned oil and had no air conditioning, hauling loads for $11 an hour, and believing that if I just kept moving, something would eventually open up. Something had. I wanted other people to know it could. The opening ceremony was at a community center on Campbellton Road in southwest Atlanta. Simple room, folding chairs, a podium with a microphone that fed back twice before someone fixed it. The kind of event that had nothing to prove and didn't try to. A woman named Millie Jenkins spoke for 15 minutes. She was a high school counselor from Carver High who had been nominated by 4 different families in the same week. She talked about what it meant for her students to see the future as something real and available to them, rather than something that happened to other people in other zip codes. I sat in the back row. Riley sat next to me. She had been volunteering with the Foundation's mentorship program since January, 3 evenings a week after her new job. She was working at a nonprofit arts program in Vine City, managing their after-school curriculum. She had found the job herself, applied like everyone else, didn't mention my name. I hadn't asked her to do any of it. She had just shown up, without being asked. After Millie finished speaking, the first scholarship recipients stood up. 6 kids, 17, 18 years old. One of them, a girl named Heidi Spencer from Adamsville, who had been working double shifts at a grocery store while taking AP classes, looked out at the room like she was trying to memorize it, like she wanted to be able to describe it exactly as it was. I recognized that look. I had worn it once, standing in a room in Macon at 18, when a man I barely knew told me I was capable of more than I had been given, and I felt for the first time like that might actually be true. I hadn't forgotten his name. I never would. After the ceremony, Riley and I drove back to Brookhaven together. She cooked, badly at first, then less badly. I had been teaching her Heidi's pot roast, 3 hours, low heat, don't touch it. And she had made it 4 Sundays in a row until she got it right. This Sunday, she got it right. We ate at the kitchen table, the same table where the tea had gone cold in October, the same table where she had smoothed the transcript with unsteady hands and said things I had needed to hear for 8 years. We talked about ordinary things, her job, the foundation, the robin that apparently decided to nest permanently in the rose garden and had strong opinions about anyone coming within 3 feet of the fence. We talked about Heidi more than we had in 8 years, and it turned out that talking about her didn't make the loss bigger. It made it softer, more like something you carry than something that carries you. After dinner, Riley washed the dishes, and I dried them the way we used to when she was small, and it was just the 2 of us closing down the kitchen at the end of the night. She said, without turning around, "Dad, that night at the restaurant, when Patrick did what he did, you didn't react. You just wiped your face and made the call. How were you that calm?" I thought about it for a moment. I wasn't calm. I was just done. She turned around. Done with what? With pretending I hadn't seen it coming, with hoping the next version of you 2 would be different from the last, with making myself small so other people could feel large. I looked at her. When you've spent 40 years building things quietly, Riley, you know that the moment you stop being quiet isn't the end of something. It's the start. She looked at me for a long time with her mother's eyes. "I'm sorry it took me so long," she said. "You were always worth showing up for. You just had to decide, too." I still drive the same truck. Still take the long way into the city sometimes, down through College Park, past the first depot, past the Hapeville facility, past the warehouses that used to be empty lots when I was 32 years old and had nothing but a handshake deal and a willingness to outwork anyone in the room. Nobody who sees me in that truck knows what I built. That used to bother me. It doesn't anymore. Patrick Bailey thought he was sitting across from a tired old man he could push around. He was sitting across from 40 years of quiet work he didn't see and didn't bother to look for. That was his mistake. Not the soup, not the lawsuit, not any of the noise he made on the way down. The mistake was deciding in 4 seconds over a handshake based on worn boots and a plain watch that he already knew everything there was to know about Connor Woods. He didn't know the first thing.
My name is Connor Woods. I am 63 years old. I built a logistics network across 5 states from the back of a pickup truck with $200 and no plan except to keep moving. I did most of it quietly. I don't need to be quiet anymore. And if someone in your life has looked at you, really looked at you, and decided in 4 seconds that they already know your limit, let them think that. Keep building. The work always tells the truth in the end.